He called me a freaking crap security guard. I was a Royal Navy commander with 25 years of service. We had been in Rosyth, on the east coast of Scotland, and were going to Faslane, the submarine base on the west coast. We were in uniform, wearing a dark blue jersey with rank slides on, a white shirt, a black tie, and black trousers, and we stopped midway to grab a coffee. My mate was getting one for me, so I was just waiting around, looking at the shop and so on, when a bloke came up to me and said, "Excuse me, where is the cash point, or ATM?" I said, "I am sorry, I don't know." Well, why would I? I was just another one of the many people taking a break. I was a bit taken aback when he said, "You're a freaking crap security guard. How long have you been working here?" It was good to know that my then 25 years of service for my country was fully appreciated. This also reminds me of traveling to the USA with my boss in the 90s. We had flown to DC in civvies, but got changed into uniform at Dulles for the short hop to Virginia Beach. And then it got weird. We had some time to kill, so we were having a beer in the airport, and some ladies started chatting to us and asked if we were pilots. Of course, we confirmed that we were. We asked them where they were going, and it was also Virginia Beach. We told them we hoped they would have a good flight, as we would be their pilots for the trip, but we were going to have another couple of drinks before we took off. They looked genuinely alarmed and scuttled off, probably to complain to someone about their pilots getting drunk. Up next. I was off duty at a Broadway show when a woman ordered me to seat her, not knowing I worked security there. I was dressed up nicely and sitting on a bench while my mother was in the restroom. I actually work for a company that provides security for this venue, but that night I was there as a guest. I explained that I didn't know where their seats were and suggested they find an usher. The woman snapped at me, saying she knew I worked there and that I needed to get up and help her. I firmly told her that I was here to enjoy the show as a guest with my mother. I repeated that an usher could help her find her seats. Even if I had been working, I still would have told her to find an usher, because I had no clue about the seating. Just then, my mother, who is also a wheelchair user, came out of the bathroom. I got up and walked off with her to find our own seats. It turns out our seats were fairly close to each other. She spent most of the show looking uncomfortable, especially when we had to share an elevator on our way out. The woman's mother quietly apologized in the elevator, while the lady herself just looked embarrassed. But the best part of the story was still to come. We were there to see the Phantom of the Opera. One person named NYC Woman Over 50 found the mother's apology particularly telling. She said, "You have to love it when the mother of a grown adult feels like they have to apologize. You got payback for days, and you weren't even trying to get it." This reader mentioned that if she ever embarrassed her mother that way, it would be the very last time she ever had the chance. Her mother would have ended her before she could do it again. Another reader, Purple Lie 354, weighed in as well. They believe that the older mother in the wheelchair is never going to let go of that incident. The adult daughter will likely be hearing about this on the regular, probably right up to her mother's final moments. Up next. All I needed was bananas for my wife, but I ended up wanting to just run to my car and drive home in complete silence. I got a call from my wife on the way home from work last night that she didn't have enough bananas for her banana pudding and asked if I could run into the grocery store to get some for her before getting home. No problem. I immediately find a spot to park. I immediately grab bananas and then walk back to the front of the store. It wasn't extremely busy, but there was a good flow of foot traffic in most aisles. When I got to the front, I was confused because there was a line of about 7 people in front of me to check out. I glanced around and didn't spot any other cash register open, so I just assumed they were short-staffed and started to scroll on my phone. A few minutes passed, and I finally made it to the front of the line, only to realize it wasn't even a checkout line. It was the line of overnight stalkers coming into work to scan their badges in to clock in. So I'm at the front of this line, holding bananas like an idiot, staring back at the ID scanner with multiple employees behind me waiting for their turn. I thought about dropping the bananas and just running to my car, but I quietly owned it, walked over to a self-checkout, got in my car, and drove home in silence. But the story was about to get even better. I won't be back in there for a while. Laugh out loud. That's where the original poster left off, but the comment section had a lot to say. User B Strauss 3 weighed in with this observation. They, the stock crew, were in shock that a customer didn't pull the Karen's entitlement card. They will be talking about you for a month, in a good way. That was user B Strauss 3. Let me know in the comments if you've ever accidentally joined the wrong line. Up next, I asked the man on the phone to transfer me to reservations. He told me I was calling his living room. This happened back in the 90s when I was a teenager. If you weren't there, just imagine a world where you couldn't Google anything. You had the yellow pages. My mom had assigned me the task of getting a campsite reservation at our favorite state park while she was at work. This place was notoriously difficult to book, especially during the nearby town's annual festival. We didn't even know the exact dates of the festival yet, so she told me to call, find out the dates, and see if by some miracle they had a cancellation for those dates. I found the number in the phone book, or so I thought, and dialed. A guy answers with a pretty casual, "Hello?" I said, "Hi, I'm calling to find out when the town festival is this year." I figured I'd confirm the dates first so I didn't look like an idiot when I asked for the campsite. The guy was nice. He gave me the exact dates, but his attitude changed when I asked the next question. I said, "Do you guys have any campsites available for that weekend?" The guy replied, I have no idea." And then it got weird. I asked, "Well, can you check the system?" The guy said, "No." I was flabbergasted, thinking to myself why this state park employee wasn't being helpful anymore. I thought maybe I had the wrong department at the park. Nevertheless, I was determined to continue the mission my mom tasked me with. If I was able to succeed, I would be the hero and have saved our family's vacation. I asked, "Can you transfer me to reservations?" There was a long, awkward silence. The guy said, "Kid, this is a private residence. You will have to call the state park." I realized I'd been treating some random guy like my personal travel agent for the last few minutes. I apologized and hung up. Turns out, I'd read the number wrong and called a guy who lived in the town where the festival takes place. He was honestly too nice for his own good. Most people would have hung up the second I asked about the festival dates. I gave up on the task, as it was too difficult for me. I didn't want another embarrassing incident. It was too much for a kid my age. I told my mom what happened when she got home from work. My whole family had a laugh at the dinner table at my expense. My mom took over the task of finding us a reservation, but she couldn't get one. We ended up going to the park anyway, and waited at the park office for an opening if someone canceled last minute. We did end up getting a good site and had a wonderful trip. Yes, I am the lady that was told by a stranger, "I don't work here." The top reply to this story, from user Penelope Janelope with 313 upvotes, shared a similar mix-up. In the early 90s, the local Yellow Pages listed her home phone number as the local auto insurance. The first time someone called her house, her 12-year-old self said, "Hello?" They asked, "Hello, Autopack?" She said yes, thinking they meant they were calling from Autopack. They gave details about a car insurance problem, then asked her for information. She told them, "I don't know." They asked, "Aren't you Autopack?" She said no. Then they asked why she said she was. She laughed and said, "Oh, I thought you said you were." They weren't laughing and asked, "Well, can you give me their number?" She said, "No, this is my house." That was user Penelope Janelope. Have you ever had a wrong number call that turned into a full conversation? Let me know in the comments. Up next, an angry woman called my shop and told me, "You don't look like Fred." The problem was, this was a phone call. I picked up the phone and said, "Hello, hello, Fred speaking. By the way, I am a woman named Fred." The older woman on the other end said, "You don't look like Fred." I told her I did the last time I looked in the mirror and asked who was calling. She then told me I didn't sound like Fred. I assured her I did and asked again who was calling. She said her name was Judith Wheeler and she was calling me back. I didn't think I was expecting a call from her and asked what it was in regards to. I was busy racking my brain to see if I had a work order for a Wheeler. She sounded very annoyed and said she was told to call back and ask for Fred in service. I realized what was happening and asked if she was trying to reach Fred Koroluk in the service department at Merlin Ford. She said yes and became very frustrated with me. I explained that she had reached Braithwaite's Upholstery and that I was Fred the upholsterer. But Judith wasn't buying my story one bit. She asked why they put her through to me. I told her it was likely because she asked for Fred, and the receptionist assumed she meant the shop instead of service by mistake. I suggested she call Ford and ask for the right Fred. She insisted she did call Ford. I told her our number is 306-664, followed by several digits, while Ford's number is 306-931 and different digits. The woman became deeply suspicious and asked how I knew who she was looking for. I explained that I drive an Escape that is old enough to need a lot of service, so I spend a lot of time and money at Ford and know their staff. She asked why she got me instead of the real Fred. I told her I am also a real Fred, but I wasn't sure why the call crossed. I asked if she dialed the number on a keypad or clicked a link. She said it was from her call history. I suggested it might be a computer glitch or a crossed wire and told her to dial directly from her keypad after we hung up. I said if it happened again, she should tell the receptionist she had the wrong number and try a different phone. She said she would try that, though she still sounded very cross, as if I were responsible. I wished her luck and a great day before she hung up. All 6 of my coworkers had stopped working and were staring at me in confusion. My boss asked what that was about. I explained she had the wrong number and wanted Fred at the Ford dealership. My boss was shocked, and I had to repeat the entire conversation to explain it to everyone. One user, Waltz Firm 6336, shared that their mother had something similar happen with her doctors once. She was chasing up a prescription, but the office said they were still waiting on one item to come in. Eventually, her mother asked what they were waiting for and was told it was gluten-free bread. She realized that was for Sally Bloggs, while her name was Sarah Bloggs. They were not related, but they went to the same slimming class. Her mother remembered Sally mentioning that the doctor had suggested she tried gluten-free products. Another person, One Refrigerator 3586, shared an experience from a tech support call center for a major global company. A woman refused to give her details because she claimed the manager was expecting her call. The employee explained they needed details to pull up the account and transfer her to the right person among hundreds of managers. The woman demanded they just go to the manager's office and tell him she was calling back. Mistaken identity is annoying, but this next caller took it too far. This went on for a long time because she did not understand that global tech companies have call centers all over the world. No one was waiting by the phone specifically for her call about an app not working. Finally, Simon's mom, bruh, added that I was friendly and helpful without escalating the situation. They said the world needs more Freds. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to deal with a caller who just would not listen to reason. Up next. String. I had just returned from a trip to New York City in late January and was exhausted from being awake since 2 a.m. local time. I was too tired to cook, so I ordered from my favorite pizza place and got in the car to go pick up my order, which is usually only about a 10-minute drive each way. A couple of blocks from the pizza place, there was a weird obstruction in traffic. I tried to get a look at it, but genuinely could not tell what was going on. It seemed like someone was pulled over or had their car halfway out in the street while parked by the curb. My lane was not moving at all, and since I was hungry and tired, I decided I had to do something. Traffic in the next lane was moving slowly, so I looked in my driver's side mirror and saw a pickup that was close but moving very slowly. I flipped my signal and turned in, thinking I had enough room, but the guy still had to brake fast and honked at me. I knew it was my bad and that I had misjudged it, but nobody was hurt and no accidents occurred. But then things got even weirder. I got to the pizza place 2 minutes later and parked. I stopped to check a message on my phone before getting out of the car. When I did, it was a very angry man outside the front door of the shop who began yelling at me. I saw his truck parked in the same lot, and I have to say, I did not know they made pickup trucks that big. It was the most massive vehicle I had ever seen that still somehow fit in a regular parking spot. In my travel-addled mind, it must have been as big as an actual truck that drags along a trailer. This dude was going off, screaming his head off about how I cut him off in traffic and making violent threats. I am 6 feet 5 inches tall, and this dude was about 5 feet 6 inches tops, so my brain did not really know how to process his aggression. He was acting hyper and going, "I am out here killing motherfuckers left and right, you do not even know." I tried to apologize, and then he headed inside the pizza place. Internally, I figured I would let him get his pizza first to help him calm down. But when I stepped inside after him, he was screaming at the whole staff. It took me a moment to process it, but he was screaming at them about me and saying their delivery boy cut him off in traffic. The staff all wear normal restaurant clothes with a branded shirt, while I am a man in his 30s wearing a graphic tee, fire engine red suspenders, and a red newsboy hat. People constantly say it makes me look like Mario with my mustache. When I finally processed it, my mood changed. I was about to find out how unhinged this man really was. It is one thing to yell at me for a mistake, but I realized he was not an actual customer and had followed me there. He was making all these other folks uncomfortable, so I got mad. I did not scream, but I raised my voice and told him very firmly, "I do not work here." The guy was stunned by this information, but he managed to recover by stammering, "Well, you look like the kind of clown who would work here." He started to raise his voice and was raving again. I have dealt with aggressive people before, but I was beginning to worry that this guy might have a weapon on him. Luckily, 2 cops happened to be having lunch in the dining room and came to the front to see what all the commotion was. They asked the staff if they wanted the guy to be there, and when they said no, they forced him to leave. There was no arrest, and I did not have to give a statement, but I was worried he would be waiting for me outside. Thankfully, he was gone, which I could tell from the absence of his insanely large truck. As I got in my car and started for home, I found myself hoping that nutjob did not have a family to bring all that anger home to. I have not seen him or his oversized truck since. User K1YCO with 329 upvotes said, "You just reminded me of a guy I used to work with. I am 5 feet 6, but the guy was like 2 to 3 inches shorter than I was. He also has a giant truck whose wheels were bigger than he was. One day I saw him sitting in his front seat, looking like a small, angry child." Another commenter, user Naps and Cheese, with 116 upvotes, weighed in. They said, I love the Napoleon in the giant truck trope. It is always them starting stuff, forgetting they are not in their lifted truck anymore. My friend and I had a guy road rage at us and scream at him to get out of the car. Once Napoleon realized he was picking a fight with a guy the size of an NFL guard, he got a lot more polite. User ToughCareer4293 added, "Original poster equals Mario, which equals Italian, which equals pizza, which equals original poster parks in front of pizza restaurant, which means original poster works at pizza restaurant. Duh. I am also 5'6", so I understand big truck man logic." Up next. String. I live at number 15, but there is a dog grooming business at number 51, and this mistake has happened before. I was just trying to catch up on emails when the barking and knocking started. I opened the door to see a lady I did not recognize, her grandson, and a man sitting in a red car parked on the footpath. I knew immediately they had the wrong address. "Hi, can I help you?" I asked. The lady replied, "Yes, we are here to drop off the dog for his grooming appointment." I told her she must have me confused with number 51, which is the actual dog groomer at the opposite end of the street. "Are you sure?" she asked. I told her I was positive I was not a dog groomer. In fact, I have 2 cats. She argued that her daughter told her it was number 15. I found it strange that she asked me multiple times if I was sure, despite there being no signage or any indication of a business at my house. One of my cats was even glaring at the dog from a safe distance, annoyed that the barking had interrupted her beauty sleep. But that wasn't the weirdest part. I rent from my parents, who have owned the house for 18 years, so it is not like a business had operated out of here recently. A user named SorryClimate7982 pointed out that some people have a fairly lengthy delay line between their mouth and ears to the conscious part of their brain. Another person, Liffy Dodge, weighed in that their phone number was close to a specialty ham store. They would get calls often to place orders, and people would even argue with them about it. Darth Lacey added that their childhood phone number was identical to a local mortuary, but with the last 2 numbers flipped. It took them a while to figure it out, because the name of the mortuary was the same as the surname of the people who lived in their house before them. Up next. Our new manager's big rule was to follow the closing checklist perfectly. That rule is why the checklist doesn't exist anymore. I used to work in a small warehouse where we had a daily closing checklist that honestly no one took too seriously. It was one of those things that had clearly been written years ago and never updated, so most of us just did the important parts and went home. Recently, we got a new manager who was very big on accountability and kept saying we needed to follow procedures exactly as written, with no shortcuts. So the next shift I decided, all right, I will follow it exactly. The checklist had things like, inspect all emergency exits, which meant I had to walk across the entire building and check doors that are basically never used. There was also a step about testing backup lighting, which involved turning off the main lights in sections and waiting to see if the backups kicked in. This whole process took way longer than usual. Since I was doing it properly, I could not help the rest of the team finish up faster like I normally would. People were stuck waiting around because certain tasks depend on others being done first. By the time I finished everything, we were almost an hour past closing time. But that wasn't the worst part. The manager was still there and asked why it took so long, so I showed him the checklist and pointed out that I followed every step exactly like he told us to. He looked pretty annoyed, but did not really have anything to say without contradicting himself. After that, the checklist mysteriously got updated the next week, and suddenly we were allowed to skip half those steps again. Some coworkers said I was being petty, but I just did what I was told, right? That is where the original poster left off, but the comment section had a lot to say about those safety procedures. The top reply, from user Buddy Matt, with 2009 upvotes, put it bluntly. Isn't that like the whole thing about emergency exits? They are only ever used in emergencies. therefore incredibly rarely. Because they are rarely used, nobody spots when they are broken or blocked, hence why it is important to manually check them before they do not open in an emergency. That was a fair point from user Buddy Matt. Another commenter, user Etar, with 503 upvotes, weighed in. As a firefighter, I am 100% good with checking every day that nobody has blocked or locked the emergency exits. A lot of the really major mass casualty fires have that one failure in common. That was from user Etar. Then user Beachfern, with 148 upvotes, added their thoughts. I do not think you were being petty. You were simply doing what you had been told to do. I am glad that the checklist has been updated, and I hope that actions such as checking backup lights are still being performed at least once per month. I am curious, what were you supposed to be checking at the emergency exits? Lit signage? Those were strong words from user Beachfern. Let me know in the comments which side you are on. Up next, string. This happened a few years ago when I was living in the dorms at college. If you have ever done laundry in a dorm, you already know it is basically a gladiator arena with lint. The dryers were not cheap, so I always tried to be strategic and economical. I would set a timer and show up early so I could get my clothes out right when the cycle finished. One day, I came back a few minutes before my cycle was done with my bag of snack-sized Doritos, feeling very responsible. I found my clothes had been pulled out early and dumped onto a table. The table was covered in a puddle of soda. So now my almost dry clothes were damp, sticky, and smelled like a Pepsi. I was furious. Not mild inconvenience furious, but more like, I paid for that dryer time, and now I have to rewash everything furious. Now, I am not a destructive person, but I do believe in educational pettiness. I noticed the person's clothes were still in the dryer, so I added the full bag of snack-sized Doritos into their laundry load, shut the door, set it to high heat, and let the cycle continue. When that dryer finished, I happened to be hanging out in the lounge outside the laundry area. But the real chaos was about to begin. A girl came out looking angry with a laundry basket full of orange-streaked Dorito-smelling clothes. Was it mature? No. Did it restore balance to the universe? Also no. Did it make me feel better in that exact moment? Absolutely. Moral of the story: do not touch other people's laundry, or you might end up smelling like a walking snack aisle. User No-Re-Till Brooklyn shared that they used to be even more petty than that. They would just crack open the dryer and leave. The way those particular dryers worked in that dorm, it would still count as dryer time. So the person would have sopping wet clothes and have to pay for more dryer time. They would then set a timer and come down one more time to specifically beat them to it so they could crack it open again. Always double tap. Another person, user Underground Avenue, never understood the thought process of these people. Why would you piss someone off while handing them a very clear opportunity and method to retaliate? It is a clear invitation to please mess with my laundry in any way you see fit. Finally, user Misanthrope67 shared that someone in her apartment dried their clothes on her dime. The neighbor then put her wet clothes back on the dryer. She told the manager, and the neighbor actually got evicted. All of that just to save $1. Up next, my coworkers' lie to our manager unraveled because of a single box of frozen waffle batter. My coworker Eric was great at the second one. He would avoid the boring stuff like wiping down the coffee station, restocking key cards, and getting breakfast set up ready, then act like we had both done equal work. When the morning manager came in, he always made himself sound way more on top of things than he really was. The part that finally got to me was breakfast prep. Night shift was supposed to leave things ready for the morning attendant, including moving the waffle batter from the freezer so it would be usable. Technically, that was shared, but the only reason it ever got done was because I reminded Eric every shift around 5:10. I did it because if it got missed, the morning shift complained at both of us. Then one morning, Eric told our manager that I was forgetful about closing details, but that he always caught things behind me. After that, I stopped reminding him. I still did my own work. I just stopped giving him the one nudge that let him act competent. 3 shifts later, the breakfast attendant opened the freezer and realized the waffle batter had never been moved. But that wasn't the worst part. The manager asked what happened, and Eric immediately tried to say he thought I handled that part. My manager just looked at him and said, "I thought you said you always double-checked behind her." The room got quiet real fast. He did not get fired or anything, but after that he stopped acting like my supervisor in a name tag. He somehow started remembering breakfast prep all by himself and helping me much more. The comment section had a lot to say about this. User Mephistocles put it bluntly, "Well done. Screw that guy. People who throw you under the bus no longer deserve to be warned when it is coming at them." User FewLion2676 weighed in. "Kudos to you. I think we have all had this guy as a coworker. I work with a guy who never reads his emails, but quickly pleads ignorance and throws up his hands over changes or new policies. The guy just flat out acts like they are not a requirement for him and relies on everyone else to inform him of what he should already know. For example, we had a mandatory training session to attend and had 6 weeks to do it. The person facilitating the training sent an email reminder twice a week about it. So of course, the guy finishes it last minute and is all flustered. He then has the nerve to hijack our next department meeting, wanting the emails sent on different days. This is the type of person I am dealing with. In the past, I would read the email aloud so he would be aware of what it said. It is petty, but forget that. I am done cluing him in to anything. This has already resulted in him being caught unaware of a couple of changes, followed by his usual "nobody told me" routine, which is now summarily replied to with, "There was an email about that." User Gallifrey shared a similar story about a manager. "Reminds me of when I used to work at Circle K. With laziness winning, the stakes for doing the right thing grew. Before your shift was over, you were supposed to clean what needed to be cleaned, and the bathrooms always needed it, and I was the only one on my shifts who did it. People would not clean it at all when I was not there. One day, the district manager was coming, so everyone was cleaning top to bottom. But I happened to be scheduled to come in at the same time as him. Luckily, my coworker cleaned the bathroom before I got in, a first time for him. As the district manager is walking around looking at stuff, he goes into the bathroom and notices how clean it was and asks my manager who cleaned it last, and she told him it was the coworker, and he said, "Give him a raise." My manager, knowing that I was the only one who cleaned it 99.9% of the time, said absolutely nothing. This is the same manager who said she could not give me a raise after 6 years of no raises because she was new and did not know me well enough to know if I was a good worker. That was the day I started working like the worker she was paying. I took multiple breaks like all my coworkers did. I barely cleaned, and I left exactly when I was supposed to, not a minute later. Things went downhill fast, and she somehow still does not notice why.